Hello and welcome. In a previous video we looked at the Dennis Dart and how that was in the right place at the right time. So here in comparison is the story of a bus that was probably in the wrong place at the wrong time. This bus was the Bedford JJL. The JJL was a purpose-built MIDI bus that was first revealed to the public in prototype form in 1976. It was exhibited at that year's motor show and had been developed by General Motors Commercial Vehicle Operations at Dunstable. The new bus that Bedford and Marshall were designing would be a semi-integral vehicle, which would be 8.5 metres long, which is the same length as one of the short darts, and it would contain 24 seats within the Marshall bodywork. It would be powered by a Bedford 330 straight-six diesel engine, which was fitted transversely across the rear of the chassis. This would all drive through a fully automatic Allison AT 540 gearbox, which then drove through a Morse chain drive transfer box to the rear axle. This new design bus would be called the JJL. The JJL came from the chassis lettering system that Bedford was using for its chassis at the time. Each letter stood for part of a description of the chassis. So the first J referred to it being a new bus series. The second J referred to the fact it was fitted with the 330 engine. And the L referred to the fact that the gross weight was in the 6,800 to 7,000 kilogram range. The first bus was completed in 1976 and had the chassis number IRKO JL 9008. This was originally an unregistered development vehicle for Bedford and Marshall. However, in October 1981 it was sold to Maidstone Borough Council, who registered it UKK 335X, and this was the only Bedford JJL to receive a Kent registration. The second bus built was given the chassis number of IRKO JL 9009, and this became AVS 303T, and this was built in November 1978. The third bus was IRKO JL 9010, this being EKX 648T, and again this was constructed sometime during 1978. The fourth prototype bus was given the chassis number IRKO JL 9011 and received the registration HKX 553V, and this was built in November 1979. These buses were tested by Bedford, and during this testing it was discovered that the brake life of the JJL was incredibly short. Now, Bedford had experienced a similar problem with its Bedford VAL coach, the well-known twin-steer coach from the 1960s and early 70s. And whilst it was no doubt possible to have rectified this issue that had popped up on the JJL, it would have been so at a much higher cost than the development would have allowed. At the same time, Bedford had been analysing the market and found that it wasn't ready for this sort of bus. The JJL was originally due to go into production in 1981 and had been priced at around the £25,000 mark, which in 1981 was very expensive for a MIDI bus. Bedford had originally worked out that they needed to sell 500 buses per annum to make money on the design. However, faced with a potential cost on the redevelopment of the braking system and the fact that the bus industry didn't really seem over-enthusiastic about the reception for the JJL, the project was quietly shelved, and the four prototype vehicles were to remain unique, if you can use the word unique for four buses. With the completion of the JJL programme, Bedford decided to sell the four vehicles that it had built. In early 1981, two of the Bedford JJLs were sold to Maidstone Borough Council, EKX 648T and HKX 553V. Maidstone Borough Council had recently gone through a bit of a change with its bus services, getting rid of its Leyland Atlanteans and replacing them with high-capacity single-decker Bedford vehicles, so it was a bit of a valued customer for Bedfords. Of the first two JJLs to arrive at Maidstone Borough Council, EKX arrived in an orange, grey and brown demonstrator livery, whilst HKX arrived in a grey, white and thin orange stripe livery, again as used as a demonstrator. In October 1981, the previous two JJLs were joined by the other two to make up the quartet, AVS 903T, which took the fleet number 334, and UKK 335X, and although carried the newest registration at X-Reg, was potentially the oldest vehicle. Both these vehicles carried fleet livery of brown and cream. Operation in Maidstone was relatively short-lived. HKX 553V did not operate in Maidstone after an accident in 1982, and the other three were hired to Brighton Borough Transport from November 1983, and were eventually sold to them in 1985, along with the damaged HKX 553V. They initially operated in the shuttle livery, where they operated between Brighton Railway Station and the main shopping centre. They eventually acquired Brighton Buses' attractive two-tone blue and white livery. At some point during their stay in Brighton, the buses had their front end rebuilt with new windscreens fitted. I'm not sure why this is. It could be the fact that the destination blind was originally behind the windscreen and it made it hard to see the destination due to reflections. Now, interestingly, just before this, in October 1985, Marshall was trying to resurrect the idea of the JJL. They wrote to various bus companies around the UK to see if there would be any interest in a bus this size. Many bus and coach operators across the land, whether National Bus Company, municipal fleets or PTEs, were starting to take an interest in these smaller vehicles. And this was at the point when the National Bus Company started ordering vast numbers of full transits and Sherpas with 16-seat bodywork by companies such as Alexander, Robin Hood and Carlisle. So 20 to 25 seats was slightly bigger than what the vehicle of the norm at the time would have been. But remarkably, the poll that Marshall conducted showed that the operators would have been interested in a bus this size. But there was still the problem with the brakes that needed addressing. And it's been quoted that the price of putting this right would have pushed the price of the vehicle up to the £35,000 to £36,000 mark. And coupled to the uncertainty surrounding the impending deregulation of the bus services and how this would affect the market, Marshall decided that it wasn't quite the right time to relaunch it. The third prototype, EKX 648T, was scrapped with Brighton Transport after hitting a tree in 1988. HKX 553V was sold to Bournemouth Corporation, who at the time was trading as Yellow Buses, in 1983, where it gained a bit of a reputation for unreliability, normally being seen on the suspended toe, parked in the back of the garage with work being done to it or broken down at the side of the road. UKK 335X and AVS 303T was sold to Northern Bus in 1992. However, it was the lucky survivor HKX 553V that was to go on to be the last Bedford JJL in service, after Yellow Buses sold it to Rambler of Hastings. By the early 1990s, the Dennis Dart was starting to take off in a big way, as we've seen in a previous video, and I will put a link to the video for the Dennis Dart up in the top right hand corner by my channel icon. And AWD Trucks, that had bought the commercial vehicle side of Bedford in 1988, actually bought one of the 4 JJLs back to evaluate it to see if it was worth restarting the programme again in light of the success of the Dennis Dart in the early 1990s. Now, I'm not sure which one of the buses it was, I'm suspecting it could have been HKX553V, but I could be wrong on that. By 2018, HKX553V was sold into preservation, and it is now the sole surviving Bedford JJL, and occasionally goes out and visits bus rallies in the northern area where it resides. Now, there is a little bit of an enigma surrounding the JJL. There were only said to be 4 vehicles built. However, there is some confusion in certain circles as to whether the engineless bus that was exhibited at the 1976 motor show was UKK 335X, or if it was another vehicle that nobody knew anything about. So there could have been a 5th JJL, which would have been the first ever one built. Now, the one that was built for the motor show wasn't a mock-up, it was an engineless vehicle. So was this the one that became UKK 335X? What do you think? We don't know. UKK 335X is being quoted as being built in 1981, which we know they weren't building JJLs by then. Were there 4? Were they 5? Or were people just getting confused with UKK 335X? Well, I hope you enjoyed this short version of the Classic Bus Histories on a very interesting little bus. One that could have been big, but was incredibly small with just 4 vehicles. Or maybe 5. Who knows? If you did enjoy this video, please like and share it. And don't forget to click the notification button and hit the little notification bell at the side so you'll receive notifications of when I make future releases in this and all my other series here on YouTube. Don't forget to comment down below on your thoughts and your opinions, and if you have any memories of the Bedford JJL. I love reading them and I always try to reply to all of your messages and comments. Don't forget, by watching this video, you're helping Southern Counties Omnibus Collection with the upkeep of its collection of vehicles. And that makes you a really amazing person. Thanks again for watching. Bye for now.